Among the biggest shocks to the Democratic Party after Donald Trump's victory was just how well Trump did with working class voters of all races. An economic realignment of sorts, underway for years, came back to bite the Democrats, according to some. And it has many wondering, how did the party of FDR, Social Security, Medicare, and labor become the party of high-income voters? And how did the party of Donald Trump and Elon Musk win with voters who make less than $100,000 a year? Now, Senator Bernie Sanders kicked off the debate this week by saying that Democrats have abandoned the working class. In a conversation with the New York Times, the former House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, shot back. And this is how she explained the Democrats losing ground with working class.
Well, there are cultural issues involved in elections as well. Guns, God, and gays. That's the way they say it. Guns, that's an issue. Gays, that's an issue. Now they're making the trans issue such an important issue in their priorities.
Now, Sanders responded to Pelosi's rebuke this morning during an interview with my colleague Kristen Welker on NBC's Meet the Press.
Bottom line, if you're an average working person out there, do you really think that the Democratic Party is going to the mats, taking on powerful special interests and fighting for you? I think the overwhelming answer is no.
Now, Sanders made a lot of these same arguments after the Democrats lost to Trump in 2016, but many Democrats weren't listening. This time around, though, he has some surprising new backers, like Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who is far, far from a left-wing Democrat. This is what he posted on X. It was a long thread, but part of it reads, when progressives like Bernie aggressively go after the elites that hold people down, they are shunned as dangerous populists. Why? Maybe because true economic populism is bad for our high-income base. We cannot be afraid of fights, especially with the economic elites who have profited off of neoliberalism. Democrats, like the Harris campaign, are tepid in our fights with billionaires and corporations. And real economic populism should be our tentpole. But it's not just Senator Murphy who has, been Bernie-pilled. Conservative New York Times columnist David Brooks, who has written columns like this one from 2020 called "No, Not Sanders, Not Ever," had this to say after Trump's victory. I'm a moderate. I like it when Democrat candidates run to the center, but I have to confess that Harris did that pretty effectively, and it did not work. Maybe the Democrats have to embrace a Bernie Sanders-style disruption, something that will make people like me feel uncomfortable. And then there's good reason for Brooks' change of hearts. On election night, despite Trump winning a decisive victory and Republicans retaking the Senate and likely the House, voters also voted in favor of progressive ballot measures like raising the minimum wage and paid sick leave. And this was in red states like Arizona, Missouri, and Alaska. There's also logic behind Senator Murphy's fear that Bernie-style populism, even after this election, will get shut down by Democrats that are elite. If you can remember, early on in Harris's campaign, she briefly took a populist tone and went on the attack against big business. Then that populism somehow disappeared as quickly as it came. Well, according to The Atlantic, Harris's brother-in-law, Tony West, who also happens to be Uber's chief legal officer, was behind that change in tone. He reportedly pushed for Harris to win over more CEOs and billionaires like Mark Cuban, who became one of the campaign's chief surrogates. Now, this tracks with reporting late in the campaign where Harris's team was bragging to the New York Times about how Wall Street was shaping her agenda. So even if Democrats do come to their senses and try to start adopting Sanders-style populism, how do they free themselves of big business when it's become so intertwined with the party? Political campaigns require gigantic sums of money, regardless of or in spite of the ideology of its candidates. And the Harris campaign did that. They raised and spent $1.8 billion this cycle. The top pollsters, consultants, and strategists all profit handsomely from these campaigns. Then they often go work in the private sector, working for the very companies Democrats should be running against. I can say one thing. If Democrats can't answer this question, they may be in for more election nights in the future like the one we witnessed on Tuesday. Kicking us off tonight, Maurice Mitchell, National Director of the Working Families Party, and Malika Jabali, journalist and author of It's Not You, it's capitalism. It's great to have both of you with us. Maurice, I'll start with you. There does seem to be a contradiction in Senator Sanders' position. On one hand, he argues that the Biden administration was the most progressive since FDR. But on the other hand, he says the party has abandoned the working class. How do you square that circle? How do Democrats translate the types of wins they delivered for the working class, the Infrastructure Act, the CHIPS Act, many of the things that they fought for and achieved during the first couple of years of the Biden-Harris administration, to long-term success?
Well, it's good to be here, Ayman. And I think that contradiction is one of the fundamental problems inside of the tent of the Democratic Party. The fact that Mark Cuban and AOC and Bernie Sanders can live inside of the same tent. You can't live inside of that tent comfortably. And so I think what he's articulating is an inconsistency and a contradiction that everyday working people can see. I agree. Like, I'm glad that you brought up the fact that in the very beginning, VP Harris was running with a populist message. We tested those messages independently as the Working Families Party, and we demonstrated that everyday working people, they're not necessarily captured by one party or another, but they're looking for people who are willing to every single day fight for them and fight against the forces that are rigging the economy and society against them, and actually name them. So when she rolled out a policy that was coming after the price gouging corporations, folks at the Working Families Party, we were excited. And then when those messages kind of got submerged, we got concerned. We published our own independent message, pro-Harris message, that spoke about economic populism. And it actually independently, it scored through the roof. And as a result, the independent vehicle of the campaign actually put money behind it. That demonstrates to us that there is something real about speaking very clearly about who you're fighting with and who you're fighting for. A Democratic Party that is chummy with billionaires, but then trying to argue that it's in the interest of unions, I think it doesn't pass the smell test for a lot of working people, which is why we build independent politics at the Working Families Party.
Malika, for all this talk about Democrats losing the working class, it's hard to ignore what Republicans represent, anything but that. I mean, Trump's biggest accomplishment in his first term was a huge tax cut, not for the working class, not for the poor, but for the rich. He campaigned with union buster and world's wealthiest man, Elon Musk. He auctioned off his energy policy to the oil industry at a meeting in Mar-a-Lago, basically, for the highest bidder. Why is he somehow resonating as a working class hero when he is anything but?
Well, I think first we have to identify what we mean by working class. And I think a big problem is that we tend to treat the working class as a monolith. So yes, he's winning over some conservatives who might have flipped over from Obama to Trump in 2016. But if you look at this election, Kamala Harris actually did better with voters of color who did not have a college degree. She had 62% to Donald Trump's 38%. So when we treat the working class as synonymous with white people, we're ignoring a lot of what's happening with what I call slide voters. These are people who are opting out of the electoral process altogether. These are non-voters, people who decide that the Republican Party is not a political home for them, even with their frustration. Black women, Black men, Latino women, these are CNAs, these are Lyft drivers, these are warehouse workers who do not actually find a home with Donald Trump and are not drawn to him. So instead of swinging back and forth, I say that they're sliding out. They are checking out of the process. 15 million people stayed home. So I don't think we should overstate Donald Trump's appeal with the working class, because it's not a monolith. And then what happens is when you have somebody like Kamala Harris, like Maurice said, who represents a party that is capitalist, just like the Republican Party is a capitalist party. They benefit from billionaire donors. So what they rely on, since their policies aren't fundamentally going to address the needs of the working class, they have to rely on certain messaging. And if Kamala Harris has mixed messages where she's starting off with this populism, but doesn't even say the word working class, I rarely heard her say that phrase, if ever. She had an economic speech in Philadelphia, or excuse me, in Pennsylvania, not long after the debate. And I think what was happening is that she was working on the defense because Trump called her a capitalist. So she has to then say, you know what? I am a capitalist. did not say anything about Medicare for all, did not say anything about a $15 minimum wage, things that were tentpole issues for Bernie Sanders. So the way that they get those people back, I think looking at non-voters who are drawn to things like a $15 minimum wage and don't believe that populism requires racism.
So let me pick up on that point, Maurice. After the results came in, you posted, speaking of looking forward, it's not enough to dust off the 2016 resistance playbook. It's time for a new playbook. What does that playbook look for you and the Working Families Party?
Sure. And I want to be clear about something, right? What's happening with class didn't start with this election or Kamala Harris. Her campaign certainly didn't fix it, but we have to be serious. And we have to be, I think, in some ways, we have to have a sense of humility around what happened. And to me, going forward, we need to build a movement, an independent political movement that's by, for, and with working people. We need to go on the offensive. We need to be able to speak the truth, which means actually calling out the people, the corporations, naming names who are making it harder for working people and offering solutions, which is why I build the Working Families Party every single day. One thing that I think is really clear for a lot of people is that people are hungry for a third force in American politics, for a political party that is connected to the interest of working people and labor. And we're going to build that over the next few years.
Malaika, is it possible for Democrats to be truly aligned with the working class and to take on corporate interests when the party and its infrastructure is so intertwined with corporate America? I mean, in other words, is it time for a third party of sorts to emerge on the scene that is truly independent and represents working class Americans?
Sure. And this conversation is about Democrats because they lost, but it could have applied to Republicans when Donald Trump lost. So he lost a lot of working class voters as well when he did not win the election in 2020. So whatever party is in charge, they're going to get blamed for not attracting working class voters. But of course, this is a protracted issue with the Democratic Party aligning with elites, being a little bit less proactive about making sure that union work is maintained and that workers feel like their wages are actually keeping up with the cost of living. So, of course, I think we would always need those options. I think when you have some independence, people, just by the statistics where you see that more and more people are considering themselves to be independent, there is a larger amount of folks who aren't identifying as Democrats or Republicans. So where do those people go? I do think there needs to be a political home for people where their votes do not depend on, whatever milieu of things that you can do to appeal to cultural values like Donald Trump tends to do in the Republican Party as a whole.